The sound of heavy boots echoed across the cracked earth. A cloud of dust rose with every step, and the air was thick with the smell of burning debris. Lena Carter, the last soldier standing, looked out over the battlefield. The once proud city of her homeland lay in ruins, the broken remains of buildings scattered across the landscape like tombstones. The enemy had come, and they had come with the full force of their might. The Xylocs were unstoppable, ruthless conquerors who had already laid waste to her world. But she wasn't going to give up, not now, not when there was still a chance. Lena's uniform was torn and stained with blood. Her face was smeared with dirt and sweat, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion that dragged at her limbs. Her rifle was heavy in her hands, and every step felt like it took everything she had. She could feel the weight of the battle in her bones, the years of fighting and losing, but she kept moving forward. Her mission was clear: hold the line for as long as she could. If she fell, humanity's last hope would fall with her. The Xylocs had invaded Earth with overwhelming force, their ships darkening the sky like a storm cloud, blocking out the sun. They were far superior in strength, technology, and numbers, and yet here she was, still standing. Because she refused to let them win. Lena had seen her comrades fall, one by one, each battle growing harder, each victory slipping farther out of reach. But she couldn't stop fighting. She couldn't give up, not when she was the last one left. If she fell, Earth's resistance would fall with her. She had been trained for moments like this, trained to fight against impossible odds, and now those odds were all that stood between her and the complete annihilation of her people. Her hand tightened around her rifle as she moved cautiously through the ruins, her boots crunching over the glass and metal shards of what had once been a thriving city. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, each beat a reminder of how much was at stake. Every step she took, she could feel the eyes of the enemy on her, watching, waiting. They had come for her, and they had come for the last remaining human resistance. But Lena wasn't going down without a fight. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint sound of alien voices. They were getting closer. The Xylocs had found her. She had been alone in this crumbling city for days, hiding, waiting for a chance to strike, but now there was nowhere left to hide. They were coming for her. She had fought every day since the invasion began, and now, standing at the edge of the ruins, Lena knew this would be her final battle. She could feel it in the air. There was no more running. There was no more hiding. The ground shook slightly as the first Xyloc soldier appeared in her line of sight, a hulking figure with thick black armor and glowing red eyes. It was massive, easily 3 times her size, its sharp claws scraping against the ground as it approached. Behind it, a dozen more of the creatures followed, their weapons raised, their eyes glowing with hunger. They were the most fearsome creatures she had ever encountered. The Xylocs had come to take everything, and now they were coming for her. Lena didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to show fear. Her grip tightened on her rifle as she raised it, taking aim. The first Xyloc soldier was almost within striking distance, its massive frame moving steadily toward her. The others were right behind it, closing in. "Hold your ground," she whispered to herself. She had been through countless battles, each one testing her resolve, pushing her to the brink. But this time, she wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for humanity's future. The first shot rang out, piercing the air. The bullet struck the Xyloc soldier in the chest, but its thick armor absorbed the impact, and it barely slowed. Lena cursed under her breath. She knew her rifle wouldn't be enough to pierce their armor, but she wasn't planning on relying on just her weapon. The Xyloc soldiers charged. Lena dove to the side, rolling behind the remnants of a destroyed building. Her heart raced as she calculated her next move. She needed to use the environment to her advantage. She couldn't take them all head-on, not like this. The Xyloc soldiers advanced, their heavy footsteps echoing through the ruined city. Lena crouched low, her breathing shallow, her mind focused. She had a few seconds to make her move. As the first Xyloc soldier neared the corner of the building, Lena sprang into action. She sprinted out from her cover, moving fast and silent, her rifle raised. She fired again, this time aiming for the joint between its armored plates. The shot landed with precision, but the creature didn't go down. It turned, its eyes narrowing as it swiped at her with its claws. Lena barely managed to dodge, the claws raking through the air where she had just been. The Xyloc soldier roared in frustration and lunged again, but this time, Lena was ready. She dropped to the ground, rolling beneath the creature's massive body. Her rifle fired twice, striking the vulnerable spot beneath its armor. The creature staggered, its growl turning into a pained roar as it collapsed. Lena didn't wait to see if it was truly dead. She scrambled to her feet, moving quickly to avoid the other Xyloc soldiers closing in on her. The battle was intense. Lena's every movement was fueled by adrenaline and the weight of the mission. She couldn't think about what would happen if she failed. She couldn't think about the world that would be lost. She only had one job: to survive. She fired again, taking down another Xylox soldier, then ducked behind a pile of rubble. The explosions around her echoed in the distance as she reloaded her rifle. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The Xylox soldiers were relentless, but so was she. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind was sharper than ever. She had trained for moments like this. She had fought on Earth's front lines against overwhelming odds. Now she was fighting to save the future of her people, and nothing would stand in her way. Her pulse quickened as the remaining soldiers approached. She could hear their growls, their jeers. They thought she was just a lone soldier, a human who had no chance against their superior strength. But they were wrong. Lena's mind worked quickly. She had to use her surroundings to her advantage, and she needed to do it now. She darted from cover to cover, drawing the Xylox soldiers deeper into the ruins of the city. As they followed, she knew they were closing in on their mistake. In one swift motion, Lena set the trap. She activated a hidden explosive device buried in the debris. The blast was deafening, sending a shockwave through the area and knocking the Xylox soldiers off their feet. The world was chaos for a moment, fire and dust filling the air. But Lena didn't stop. She sprinted forward, her rifle raised, her eyes focused on the final target, the leader of the Xylox forces. She had to end it now. The leader turned to face her, its massive form towering over the ruins. Lena knew this would be the hardest part, but she was ready. She had to be. With everything she had left, she charged at the alien leader. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she crouched behind the shattered remains of a building. The faint smell of burning metal mixed with the thick dust that clung to the air, making it harder to breathe. Her eyes scanned the horizon, every inch of her senses on high alert. The battle was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning. The Xylox had pushed deeper into the city. She had seen it all, the way they slaughtered her comrades, the way they tore apart the streets, turning them into nothing but dust and rubble. The loss was overwhelming. She could still hear the screams of the last resistance soldiers, the ones who had fought so bravely by her side before they were overwhelmed. But Lena wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She couldn't. Not when everything they had worked for was at stake. The sounds of alien footsteps drew her attention. She could hear the Xylox soldiers moving, their armored boots crunching against the shattered ground. They were getting closer. Too close. Lena's hand trembled as she gripped her rifle, her fingers cold against the metal. The weight of the weapon was both a comfort and a burden. She had relied on it for days, using it to fight to survive. But the truth was, her rifle could only do so much. The Xylox were relentless, stronger, and more powerful than anything she had ever faced. And yet, she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The fear had been replaced with something else: determination. The first Xylox soldier appeared in her line of sight, his massive form blocking the dim light. His thick armor gleamed in the harsh light of the setting sun, his glowing red eyes scanning the area. A monstrous roar echoed from his throat, a signal to the others. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She was outnumbered, alone. The rest of her squad had fallen during the last fight. She had seen them fall one by one, but she wasn't going to let their deaths be in vain. She steadied her rifle, her hands now calm despite the chaos that swirled around her. She had done this before. She had taken down dozens of these creatures, but this time it was different. This time, she was the last one standing. If she fell, Earth's resistance would fall with her, but she wasn't going to fall. She fired. The shot rang out, echoing across the battlefield. The first Xylox soldier staggered, the bullet landing directly between the joints of its armor. It howled in pain, a shrill sound that made Lena's blood run cold, but it didn't stop. The creature's body was built for battle, and even a direct shot couldn't take it down that easily. It turned toward her, its sharp claws extending like daggers. Lena barely had time to react as the alien lunged forward, its speed faster than she had anticipated. She dodged just in time, the claws missing her by inches, the air buzzing with the force of the attack. Without thinking, she dove to the side, rolling across the ground to regain her footing. Her heart raced in her chest, adrenaline pumping through her veins. She had to think quickly. The Xylox soldier was already turning to face her, its claws raised for another strike. This time she wasn't going to wait for it to attack first. With a surge of energy, she sprinted forward, closing the gap between them. The Xylox didn't expect it. Before it could react, Lena jumped, grabbing a sharp piece of debris and using it to slash at the creature's exposed side. The soldier screamed in agony as it stumbled back, but Lena didn't hesitate. She pressed forward, landing a blow to its face with the butt of her rifle. The Xylox soldier staggered again, but this time it didn't get back up. With a final, desperate howl, it collapsed, the weight of its massive body hitting the ground with a deafening crash. Lena stood over it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't have time to celebrate the victory. She had only a few moments before the others arrived. But before she could make a move, she heard it, another roar, louder, more terrifying. The next wave of Xylox soldiers had arrived. Her stomach dropped. She could feel the tension building in the pit of her stomach. The fight wasn't over. She had taken down one, but there were so many more. She glanced around quickly. She needed cover. She needed to make a plan. The Xylox soldiers were closing in, their massive figures emerging from the smoke and shadows. Lena's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the battle, the pressure to keep fighting, to keep surviving. It would take everything she had to make it through. But she couldn't stop. Not now. With one last look at the battlefield, Lena sprinted for the remains of an old building. It was a small shelter, offering some cover from the oncoming fire. She dove behind the broken walls, her rifle raised, her breathing steady as she prepared for the next wave. The Xylox soldiers were relentless, but so was she. She fired again, her shot landing perfectly in the chest of one of the advancing creatures. It faltered, but still didn't go down. It swiped at her with its claws, narrowly missing her face. She ducked, rolling to the side just as it tried to strike again. Her body was sore from the constant movement, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The battlefield felt like it was closing in on her, the Xylox forces moving faster than she could keep up. But Lena had one thing the aliens didn't, her humanity. She fought with everything she had, with every ounce of strength, every memory of what she was fighting for. The fire in her chest burned brighter. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for her planet. She was fighting for every life that had been lost to these invaders. The aliens were coming at her from all sides now. Lena had no choice but to fight back with everything she had. She pushed her body to its limits, firing, dodging, taking down every enemy that came her way. The battle was chaotic, the world around her a blur of gunfire, screams, and explosions. But amidst the chaos, Lena found her rhythm. She was moving faster, thinking quicker. Every time she pulled the trigger, it felt more like instinct than thought. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was the last line of defense. And she wasn't about to let her world fall. Not today. Lena crouched low behind the remains of a collapsed building, her heart hammering in her chest. The smell of smoke and burnt metal still lingered in the air, a harsh reminder of the destruction that had been wrought on her world. Her hands trembled as she gripped her rifle, her fingers cold despite the heat of the battle around her. She had faced overwhelming odds before, but this was different. This was her last chance. The Xylox forces had broken through Earth's final defenses, leaving nothing but chaos in their wake. Her comrades were gone, their bodies scattered across the battlefield. She had watched them fall one by one, each death a reminder of how close they were to losing everything. But Lena couldn't afford to mourn them now. There was no time. The enemy was still out there, closing in, determined to wipe out the last remnants of humanity. Her eyes scanned the battlefield. Xylox soldiers were everywhere, their massive forms moving through the smoke, their weapons raised. They were relentless, and they didn't care about the lives they destroyed. But Lena, she cared. She cared about every single life that had been lost, every life that still hung in the balance. The Xylox commander, a towering figure clad in black armor, was at the front of the advancing army. His glowing red eyes locked onto her position, and Lena could feel his gaze pierce through her. He knew she was there. He knew she was the last human standing. But Lena wasn't going to let him win. She wouldn't let them take her world without a fight. A roar echoed in the distance, and the sound of footsteps grew louder. The Xylox forces were closing in, and they wouldn't stop until she was dead. But Lena wasn't afraid. She had fought too long and too hard to give up now. The fear she had felt in the beginning had faded, replaced by something stronger, determination. She adjusted her grip on the rifle, her breath steady as she waited for the perfect moment. The first Xylox soldier came into view, its armor glinting in the dim light. Without hesitation, Lena fired. The shot rang out, striking the creature square in the chest. It staggered back, but it didn't fall. The alien let out a screech, its eyes burning with fury. Lena fired again, this time aiming for its head. The creature's body jerked and it fell to the ground, motionless. one down. But the battle wasn't over. More Xylox soldiers surged forward, their eyes locked on her position. They were fast, too fast. Lena's heart raced as she pushed herself up, moving to a better vantage point. She knew she couldn't take them all down with just her rifle. She needed to outsmart them, use their arrogance against them. She spotted an overturned vehicle nearby, its steel frame offering a brief moment of cover. She dashed toward it, her legs pumping hard, her breath coming in short gasps. The Xylox soldiers were gaining on her, but Lena was faster. She slid behind the vehicle, peering out from the edge. The Xylox were scattered now, some of them searching for her, others firing at anything that moved. Lena's eyes darted around, looking for the next move. She needed to draw their attention away from her. Her fingers brushed over a grenade strapped to her vest. It was risky, but it was her only shot. She pulled the pin and tossed the grenade into the middle of the Xylox soldiers. The explosion was deafening, a burst of light and sound that sent the aliens scrambling. Lena didn't wait for them to recover. She was already on the move, her rifle raised once more. Another soldier came into view. Lena fired, the bullet striking it in the leg. It fell to the ground, howling in pain. She didn't give it a chance to recover. She fired again, hitting its head. Another one down. But the Xylox weren't slowing. They kept coming, wave after wave, each one more determined than the last. Lena's breath came in ragged gasps, her hands slick with sweat and blood. She had never been so tired in her life, but she couldn't stop. Not now, not when the stakes were this high. The Xylox commander was still alive, still leading his forces. He was bigger than the others, his armor more advanced, his presence more menacing. Lena could see him now, standing behind his soldiers, watching her with those cold, glowing eyes. He knew she was the last human standing. He knew that if he could take her down, the battle would be over. And so he sent more of his soldiers after her. Lena didn't back down. She could feel the pressure building, but she didn't let it control her. She couldn't. Her mind was clear, her focus sharp. She took another shot, then another, picking off one Xylox soldier after another, but they just kept coming. She was getting slower, weaker. Her body was beginning to feel the toll of the battle. Her hands shook with exhaustion, and her breath came in short, painful bursts. But she couldn't stop. Not now. As the last of the Xylox soldiers fell, Lena knew what she had to do. She had to face the commander. It was the only way to end this. She adjusted her rifle and moved toward the commander, her steps slow but steady. She knew this would be her final fight. If she didn't take him down now, everything she had fought for would be for nothing. The Xylox commander stood tall, his eyes filled with a mix of fury and admiration. He had seen her take down his soldiers one by one. He knew she was strong, but he also knew that he was stronger. "You're a brave human," he said, his voice deep and unsettling. "But you cannot win. You are alone. Your people are already dead." Lena's eyes hardened. "Not yet," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that gripped her. "And as long as I'm alive, I'll keep fighting." The Xylox commander roared, his massive claws swinging toward her. But Lena was faster. She ducked beneath his attack and rolled to the side, her rifle firing as she moved. The bullet struck him in the chest, but it didn't slow him down. He lunged again, but this time Lena was ready. She grabbed a piece of debris from the ground and used it to knock his weapon out of his hands. She was close now, so close. With a final, desperate push, she drove her elbow into the commander's side, knocking him off balance. This was her moment. Lena grabbed his neck, her fingers tight around his throat, and with one final, brutal twist, she ended the fight. The Xylox commander fell to the ground, lifeless. The battlefield was silent. Lena stood over him, her chest heaving, her hands shaking. She had done it. She had won. But as the dust settled, Lena looked out over the battlefield. The fight wasn't over. There was still so much to do. The war wasn't won in a single battle, but today she had taken the first step. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lena allowed herself a small breath of relief. She wasn't alone anymore. Not as long as there was still a fight to be fought. The smoke hung thick in the air, swirling around the crumbled buildings that once stood tall and proud. Lena's boots crunched against the broken glass and debris as she moved through the ruined streets. Her body felt heavy, drained from the fight, but her mind was sharp. There was no time to rest. Not yet. She had taken down the Xylox commander. She had defeated their strongest force, but the war was far from over. The Xylox had control of Earth's last major stronghold, and as long as they held that power, humanity was not free. Lena had only one thing on her mind now. She had to get to the heart of the enemy's command center and destroy it. If she could do that, they would have a chance. But the road ahead was dangerous. She was alone now with no backup. The rest of her unit had fallen, leaving her as the sole survivor. Her comrades' faces flashed in her mind, each one a memory of the friends she had lost, the bonds they had forged in the heat of battle. She fought for them. She fought for the future they wouldn't have. The wind whipped through the broken streets, carrying with it the faint sound of enemy activity. The Xylocs were regrouping. They were organizing for one last push to crush any remaining resistance, and Lena knew that time was running out. She pushed forward, her rifle tight in her hands, the weight of it comforting despite the exhaustion in her limbs. Her steps were cautious now, each one measured. She knew the Xylocs had eyes everywhere. They were waiting for her to make a mistake, but she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. A faint sound caught her attention. She stopped and listened carefully, her pulse quickening. It was the sound of movement, quick, quiet steps, too soft for a Xylox soldier. Lena turned swiftly, crouching behind a piece of debris, her rifle aimed at the shadow ahead. Her breath held, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure stepped into view, and for a moment she almost let the shot go. But then she recognized the figure. "Selene," Lena breathed out, lowering her weapon as the woman emerged from the shadows. Selene was one of the few remaining humans who had fought in the resistance. Her face was weathered, her body covered in dirt and scratches, but her eyes held the same determination that Lena saw in herself. She had survived, just like Lena, and now they were both standing here, against all odds. Lena's shoulders sagged with relief. "I thought I was the only one left," she said, her voice softer than she intended. Selene gave a faint smile. "You're not alone anymore." She glanced at the battlefield, her gaze darkening. "But there's still work to be done." Lena nodded. She didn't need to be reminded. "The command center, we need to take it down." Selene's eyes met hers, and in them, Lena saw the same unspoken understanding. They were the last of the resistance. If they didn't succeed, humanity's fight would be over. "I've got your back," Selene said, stepping forward and motioning for Lena to follow. Together, they moved through the wreckage of the city, carefully making their way toward the heart of the Xylox stronghold. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced at Selene. They were two women against an entire army. It was crazy. But Lena knew something the Xylox didn't. Humans could survive anything, no matter the odds. They reached a narrow alley, the walls lined with alien markings. Lena and Selene crouched behind the corner, watching as a group of Xylox soldiers passed by. The creatures moved in sync, their eyes scanning the streets for any sign of life. But they didn't see the two humans hiding in the shadows. Lena's breath caught as the last soldier passed. She held her rifle tightly, praying they wouldn't be spotted. When the group was out of sight, Lena gave Selene a quick nod, and the two of them moved forward, keeping to the darkness. As they neared the command center, the presence of the enemy grew stronger. Lena could hear the faint hum of machinery, the distant sound of Xylox chatter. The central building loomed ahead, a dark, imposing structure that seemed to swallow the light around it. Inside, she knew the heart of the Xylox empire beat. If they could destroy it, they could cripple the entire alien force. But getting in wouldn't be easy. The entrance was heavily guarded. Two Xylox soldiers stood watch, their attention fixed on the path ahead. There was no way they could sneak past them, but Lena wasn't about to give up now. She turned to Selene, her voice low. "We'll have to take them out, quietly." Selene nodded, her face set in determination. "You take the left one, I'll get the right." Lena's heart raced as she crept forward, her every movement calculated. She couldn't afford to make a sound. The stakes were higher now. If they were caught, it would be the end. She was close now, so close she could hear the Xylox soldiers breathing. She tightened her grip on her weapon and moved in, faster than a heartbeat. In one smooth motion, Lena knocked the soldier's weapon aside and drove the butt of her rifle into its throat. The alien's eyes widened in surprise, but before it could make a sound, Lena dropped it to the ground, silent as a shadow. At the same time, Selene did the same. The second soldier was down in seconds, its body crumpling to the ground without a sound. Lena's chest heaved with the effort, but there was no time to rest. They had to move quickly. The door to the command center was ahead, and there were no more distractions. She motioned for Selene to follow, and the two women crept toward the entrance. Lena's fingers brushed the keypad next to the door, her mind racing. She had no idea how the Xylox security systems worked, but she had learned to hack just enough to make it work. She pressed a few buttons, hoping her guess was right. A soft click echoed in the stillness, The door slid open. They were in. The command center was unlike anything Lena had imagined. The walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols, the air thick with the hum of alien technology. It felt cold, sterile, and oppressive. At the far end of the room stood a large control panel, surrounded by Xylox engineers who were too distracted to notice them. They were focused on the screens, unaware of the two humans that had slipped past their defenses. Lena and Selene shared a look. They had to act fast. They moved toward the control panel, their footsteps light and quick. Lena reached the panel first. She didn't need to know how it worked. She had one mission: destroy it. With a swift motion, she pressed the button that would overload the system. The whole room shuddered as the alien technology began to malfunction. Sparks flew from the console and the lights flickered. The Xylox engineers looked up in surprise, but it was too late. Lena and Selene turned and ran, the command center shaking behind them. They knew they didn't have much time before the explosion took down the entire structure. The Xylox soldiers were coming now, but Lena wasn't scared anymore. She had done it. They had done it. The Xylox empire was crumbling, and they were the reason why. As they made their way out of the building, Lena heard the familiar sound of the explosion, the blast ringing in her ears. She knew what it meant. Earth's last hope had just been set free. And for the first time in a long time, Lena let herself smile. They had won, and no one could take that from them. Lena ran, her legs burning with every step, but she didn't slow down. The explosion had torn through the command center, sending shockwaves that rattled her bones. The Xylox soldiers were right behind her now, their footsteps thundering through the crumbling structure. But she wasn't worried, not anymore. She had done it. The heart of the Xylox empire had been hit, and with it the hope of humanity's survival had grown stronger. But the battle wasn't over. The fight was still raging, and Lena wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. Selene was ahead of her, just a few steps away. The two women had been running side by side for hours, their bodies aching from the constant motion, their weapons heavy in their hands. But their mission wasn't over. They still had to make it to the extraction point before the entire Xylox army descended upon them. The city around them was a battlefield. The ground was torn up, scarred by explosions and alien fire. Buildings that had once been symbols of humanity's strength were now nothing but rubble. The air was thick with smoke, the acrid smell of burning metal stinging their lungs. Lena's mind was focused, but her thoughts kept drifting back to everything they had lost. The people she had fought beside, the friends she had seen fall. She could still hear their voices, their laughter echoing in her mind. But that was all they were now, memories. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about survival for the future, for every life that had been taken from them. "We're almost there," Selene called over her shoulder, her voice strained but determined. Lena pushed herself harder, forcing her body to keep moving even as it screamed in protest. She couldn't afford to stop now, not when they were so close. Suddenly the ground shook beneath them, and the sky above lit up with a blinding flash. The Xylox were retaliating. Their ships were closing in, their massive forms hovering above the ruins of the city. Lena's heart skipped a beat. The extraction point was in sight, just a few hundred meters ahead, but the air was alive with danger. The Xylox were about to drop everything they had on them. She could see the soldiers gathering, preparing for their final assault. "We need to move now," Lena shouted. She saw Selene glance over at her, eyes wide with the same realization. They couldn't outrun the Xylox forever. They needed to fight, one last stand. "Keep going, I'll cover you," Lena ordered, the words rushing out of her before she even thought about them. She didn't wait for Selene's response. Selene nodded and pushed forward, but Lena stayed back for just a moment longer. She could see the Xylox forces closing in, their weapons raised, their claws gleaming in the dim light. There were too many of them, and they were getting closer by the second. Lena's breath hitched, but she quickly steadied herself. She wasn't afraid. She had fought too hard, come too far to let fear take over. It was now or never. She turned to face the enemy, her rifle raised, her fingers wrapping tightly around the trigger. The first Xylox soldier came into view, its massive frame charging toward her. Without hesitation, Lena fired. The bullet hit its target and the creature fell, but it didn't stop. The soldiers behind it didn't hesitate either. Lena fired again and again, each shot precise, but they kept coming. The Xylox were relentless and she was running out of time, but she couldn't stop. She wouldn't. Her mind was clear, her focus sharp. She had to hold them off just long enough for Selene to get to safety. She couldn't let the Xylox win, not after everything, not when they were so close. The sound of the Xylox's claws scraping against the concrete was deafening as they charged forward. Lena's heart raced, but her body moved instinctively, her training kicking in. She ducked behind a piece of rubble, her rifle aimed as she picked off the approaching creatures. Her arms burned, her body felt like it was on fire, but she didn't stop. One by one, the Xylox fell. The explosions around them grew louder, closer. Lena knew they couldn't hold out much longer. They had to get out. Now. "Lena, we need to go." Selene's voice rang out from the other side of the battlefield. She had reached the extraction point, but Lena knew it wasn't safe yet. Another Xylox soldier, larger than the rest, emerged from the smoke. It was the last one standing, its eyes glowing with fury. This was the one that had to be stopped. If it reached Selene, all was lost. Lena's heart skipped a beat as the creature charged, faster than she could track. She aimed her rifle, but the distance was too great. She couldn't get a clear shot. Without thinking, Lena dropped her rifle and ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her legs carrying her toward the beast. The Xylox's claws swiped the air as it lunged, but Lena dove beneath it, grabbing the nearest piece of metal she could find, a jagged shard of debris. She didn't hesitate. She slammed the sharp edge into the creature's side, driving it into the soft underbelly of its armor. The Xylox howled in pain, but Lena didn't stop. She twisted the metal deeper, her arms straining with the effort. The creature staggered back, its glowing eyes filled with shock. But Lena didn't give it a chance to recover. With a final push, she drove the metal through the heart of the beast. It crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Lena fell to her knees, her body shaking from exhaustion. She had done it. She had saved them. Selene rushed to her side, pulling her to her feet. "We've got to go, Lena, now," she urged. Lena nodded, her breath ragged. The battlefield was still alive with the roar of alien ships, the distant thuds of explosions, but it didn't matter. The battle was over. They had won, and they were going home. Selene helped Lena stumble toward the extraction point, their movement slow but steady. Behind them, the city still burned, but the Xylox were retreating. They had fought hard, but they had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated Lena. She had stood her ground, she had fought for the future of her people, and in the end, she had won. As the extraction ship's doors closed behind them, Lena allowed herself to take a deep breath. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was something more. She was a symbol of what humanity could do when it refused to give up. She looked out the window as the city disappeared into the distance, the smoke of the battle slowly fading into the night sky. They had lost so much, but they had also gained something priceless. Hope. And with that hope, Lena knew they would rebuild. They would rise again. The Xylox had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Lena's body ached as she collapsed into the seat of the extraction ship. Every muscle screamed in protest, but she didn't care. The ship's engines hummed beneath her, the sound almost soothing after the chaos of the battlefield. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the noise of the ship and the fading echoes of the battle drift away. She had done it, they had done it. Earth had survived another day. But victory had its cost. She could still see the faces of the fallen soldiers in her mind, hear their voices, their laughter, even the screams of the last battle. She hadn't been alone when this war started. She had fought alongside brave men and women who had given their lives for the same cause. And now she was one of the last standing. It should have felt like a victory, but it didn't. It felt hollow. The soft click of a seatbelt snapping into place brought her back to reality. Selene had sat beside her, her face worn but determined. She didn't look much different from Lena. Both of them were covered in dirt, blood, and sweat. But there was something about Selene's presence, her quiet strength, that reminded Lena that they weren't alone. Not anymore. "We did it, Lena," Selene said softly, her voice filled with exhaustion but with a hint of pride. "We actually did it." Lena nodded, her throat tight. She had fought to survive, but now that they had succeeded, the weight of the cost pressed down on her chest. They had lost so many. Friends, allies. The future of their world had seemed so uncertain in those final moments. Selene's gaze met hers. "I know you're thinking about them, about everyone we've lost, but we can't let that break us. They gave everything for us to win. We carry their memory forward." Lena didn't answer right away. She thought about what Selene had said, how she could feel the loss in every inch of her body, but she couldn't allow herself to dwell on it. Not yet. She had to keep moving forward. That's what they had all fought for, after all. For the chance to rebuild, to heal, and to give humanity a second chance. The ship jolted as it left the atmosphere, climbing higher into the dark expanse of space. The remnants of the battle on Earth slowly disappeared from view, replaced by the cold vastness of the universe. But even in the face of such endless space, Lena felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't sure if she could fully accept it yet, but she knew this victory had to mean something. "What now?" Lena asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. She wasn't sure if she was speaking to Selene or to herself. "We've won, but it doesn't feel like we have." Selene gave a small, tired smile. "Now we take what we've learned, we rebuild. The war isn't over, but we've shown the Xylox that they can't just take what's ours. We fight again, but this time with the strength of everyone who didn't make it." Lena looked at Selene, her eyes flicking over the tiredness etched in her face, the pain that was still there. They had both lost so much, and yet they were the ones who would carry on. The people who hadn't made it, they would never be forgotten. The survivors would honor them by continuing the fight. The ship's systems hummed quietly, and for the first time, Lena allowed herself to breathe a little easier. The battle for Earth wasn't over. The Xylox had more forces. They were only retreating for now, regrouping, but they would be back. There would be no easy peace. But this time, Lena was ready. "This is just the beginning," Lena said, the weight of the words settling in her chest. "We've won this round, but we can't stop. We have to finish what we started." Selene nodded, her eyes focused on the view out the window. "We will, together." A silence fell between them, comfortable yet heavy. They both knew that the road ahead would be long. Rebuilding the world wasn't going to happen overnight. There were so many things to fix, so many people to find, to help, to rebuild relationships with. The fight had taken everything from them, but it also showed them something they couldn't ignore. Lena reached up, rubbing her eyes. "We need to do something more than just survive. We need to rebuild, make sure our children don't grow up in fear, make sure Earth stands strong against them if they ever come back." "They'll never take us down again," Selene said, determination rising in her voice. "We've survived their worst and will keep fighting until they know that Earth will never fall." Lena could see it now. Her mind was starting to work again. The pieces of their future began to come together, even in the face of everything they had lost. They would rebuild, not just cities but people, unity. They would form an army stronger than anything the Xylox could imagine. It would take time, but they would start now. Lena turned to Selene, her voice steady now, stronger than before. "We've got to find the others, the rest of the resistance. There has to be more of us out there." Selene met her gaze, her expression hardening. "They're out there, we'll find them, and we'll keep fighting until Earth is free again. The Xylox will never win, we'll make sure of that." The ship continued to ascend, the distant stars shining brightly against the vast blackness of space. Earth was behind them now, but they carried it with them, the memories, the people, the fight. It wasn't over. The real fight had only just begun. Lena stood and moved toward the ship's navigation console. She wasn't sure where they would go, but she knew one thing for sure. Wherever it was, they would rebuild. They would fight until Earth was theirs again. The Xylox had shown their power, but they had also shown one thing: they could be defeated. And it was the humans who had proven it. "Where to next?" Selene asked, coming up beside Lena, her voice soft but full of resolve. Lena paused for a moment, looking out the window at the Earth below, the ruins of the city fading into the distance. "Wherever the fight takes us." She wasn't sure how long the war would last or how many more battles would come. But one thing was clear: this fight had changed her. It had changed them both. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors. And they would never stop fighting. The quiet hum of the ship was the only sound that filled the small cockpit as Lena sat in the pilot's seat, her fingers gently tapping on the controls. Outside, the endless expanse of space stretched before her, and behind her, Earth was now a small, fading blue and green ball, hanging in the darkness like a memory. The world she had fought so hard to protect was now behind them. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. She had won the battle. She had faced down the worst the Xylox had to offer, and she had come out on top. But the war was far from over. "Where to now?" Selene's voice cut through the silence, pulling Lena from her thoughts. She turned to find Selene standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Lena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on the view outside the ship's window. Earth, the place where she was born, the place that had once felt so safe, was now a battlefield. A place of destruction, a place of memories, but even with all the loss, there was hope now. There was a chance to rebuild. "We need to find the rest of the resistance," Lena finally said, her voice steady despite the fatigue that clung to her. "There has to be more of us out there." Selene nodded, her gaze hardening with determination. "We'll find them. We'll find anyone still standing, and we'll make them strong, together." The truth of Selene's words settled in the quiet of the ship. Together. They weren't alone anymore. They hadn't been alone in a long time, but it felt different now. The war had taken so much from them, but it had also shown them something they would never forget. The power of unity, the strength of the human spirit, and most of all, the unbreakable bond they had forged in the fires of battle. The fight had been long and brutal. They had lost so many, but they had won. Earth had won. For now, that was enough. Lena glanced over at Selene, meeting her eyes. "Where do we start?" Selene took a deep breath, her face serious. "There's a safe house on Titan. We've used it before. It's remote, hard to find." Lena turned her gaze back to the window. Titan. It felt like the right place to go, to regroup, to plan. There was no time to waste. The Xylocs were still out there, and if they thought humanity would surrender, they were sorely mistaken. "We head to Titan," Lena said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "We find the rest of the resistance, and we strike back." The journey to Titan was long, and every minute of it felt like an eternity. Lena and Selene spent the hours poring over maps, discussing strategy, and preparing for what lay ahead. They knew it wouldn't be easy. The Xylocs had resources, ships, and soldiers, but what they didn't have was the human spirit. What they didn't have was the unshakable will to fight for a home that wasn't just a planet. It was everything they were. Their families, their memories, their futures. When they finally reached Titan, it was as desolate as Lena had remembered. The icy moon was a place of refuge, hidden away in the farthest reaches of the system. The safe house was tucked into the shadow of a massive rock formation, camouflaged by years of neglect. It had been untouched for months, maybe longer. Lena parked the ship in the small, hidden clearing and stepped out, feeling the cold air hit her face. It was different here. The air was thin, but the silence was what took her breath away. There were no sounds of battle, no explosions or gunfire, just the haunting quiet of space. "This is it," Selene said, gesturing toward the entrance of the safe house. "No one, been here for a while, but it's still secure. It'll do for now." Lena nodded and followed Selene inside. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the dark interior. The lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the concrete floors. It was a small place, nothing like the military bases they had fought in, but it was a home. A place to rest, to plan, to gather strength. Lena set her gear down, taking in the sparse, utilitarian space. A small table, a few chairs, some supplies scattered around the room. Nothing fancy, but it was enough. She could feel the weight of everything pressing on her shoulders, the future of Earth, the hope of humanity, but she refused to let it break her. "I'll set up communications," Selene said, already moving to the far corner of the room to open a set of old equipment. "We need to contact the remaining groups, see who's still out there." Lena didn't reply right away. Instead, she moved to the small window at the back of the room, looking out at the barren landscape of Titan. It felt surreal, standing here after everything they had been through. Earth was still so far away, and yet it felt closer than ever. The Xylocs may have broken their world, but they hadn't broken their will. A soft beep from the communications console brought Lena back to reality. She turned to see Selene, her face illuminated by the flickering lights of the machine, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. "I've got a signal," Selene said, her voice filled with hope. "We've got contact, we're not alone." Lena's heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone. There were still humans out there, still fighting. She walked over, standing beside Selene as the screen blinked to life, showing a blurry image of a man. His face was rugged, tired, but his eyes were filled with determination. "Lena Carter," the man said, his voice rough. "I thought we lost you. We've been trying to reach you for days. Where are you?" "Titan," Lena said, her voice steady. "We're here, we're alive, and we're coming for them. We've got a plan." The man on the screen smiled, a tired but hopeful smile. "Then we're with you. We've got forces here. We're ready to fight." Lena's chest tightened with emotion. They had done it. They had found the resistance. They were not alone. She turned to Selene, her eyes filled with fire. "It's time," she said, her voice strong. "We fight, we take back our world." Selene nodded, a small, proud smile tugging at her lips. "Let's make them regret ever coming here." And just like that, the weight of everything that had happened, all the loss, the pain, the endless battle seemed to lighten. There was hope, there was strength, and with it there was a new beginning. The fight for Earth wasn't over. It had only just begun.